news this week. One of the wilder weeks, I think, in Detroit sports media that we can remember in a long time. And that's what I want to kind of start with, Sean. Everything that's gone on with Sherrone Moore this week. Like, where does this rank in terms of stories that you've covered throughout your career?
It's up there with anything. The surreal picture of him sitting in that arraignment, that I don't, it got me. It's fun. There it is. I just, is this real? I mean, literally 24 hours beforehand, he's thinking about a big bowl game and all these, incredible things. And, the class that he just brought in and to that, it's remarkable. Dan, you and I kind of exchanged some notes. Things were out there. There were things that were out there. As you well know, Lord knows there have been so many unsubstantiated rumors over the years and everything. And there was no, confirmation of some of the stuff that was going on. But once it started to come out, boy, it just rained. It's just an incredible, surreal couple of days. No doubt about that.
You mentioned, you mentioned the class they just brought in and they just signed, and then just have this all comes out just a day or two later. And like that bothers me a lot in that, right? Like if more than one person knew about this, like you have to assume like the rest of the coaching staff probably knew about it, unfortunately. Right. And like, I know there's shadiness and stuff going on at the college level everywhere, regardless that goes on. But like, gosh, so like you're recruiting those kids and you're telling them, hey man, we want you here for the next 4 years or whatever it may be, knowing this stuff's going on. Like that just sits sour with me. You know what I'm saying? And I'm surprised not more kids have already said, hey, like we're looking elsewhere. I know there's been a couple, right? But I'm surprised there hasn't been more, or all of them saying like, hey man, like, no, we're bailing. Because that just is awful on so many levels, in my opinion.
It was really interesting because like we talked about it on the entities that I work with. And the one thing that I said about the unsubstantiated rumors at the time is I said, I'm not going to lend credence to it to talk about that. But outside of that, there were a lot of rumors that he was in trouble. There was speculation that there were players only meetings and then a couple coaches showed up, and there's been the speculation that he hadn't talked to his defensive coordinator since the USC game. So there was a lot of stuff out there. And it's one of those, you got to go with what you heard type of things. I had a guy tell me point blank that he thought that he might be done when the signing period was over. And when I heard that, I had the exact same reaction that you did. No, wait a second. We're going to wait until everything's signed, sealed, and delivered. And then boom, we're going to go in a different direction. But yeah, he didn't have a lot of friends. And it's amazing how that always works itself out after the fact. It didn't seem like he had a lot of friends in the athletic department, even before we found out this just crazy information and unfortunate situation. And I always say the same thing. I'm a parent. For this to happen to those poor kids, they don't have anything to do with that. That's the stuff that breaks my heart. And if you want to call me a daisy or whatever for saying that, then so be it. I'm a pretty daisy, because you're talking about little kids just a couple weeks before Christmas, and it just breaks your heart. It really does.
Yeah.
Where do you think this puts Ward Manuel, athletic director for Michigan? I mean, just scandal after scandal after scandal, but he still stays around, man. You got to believe that seat is red hot right now.
You would think so, but you take a look at some of the things going on in the athletic department. Obviously, they print money. I mean, that's the name of the game. They print money. The hockey team is tremendous. The basketball team is tremendous. So, maybe that's it, but yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that he's Teflon, and right now I would have to agree with that, because it has been scandal after scandal after scandal in varying degree and everything. But I don't know, guys. I mean, here we are Sunday, December 14th. And if nothing's happened by far, I don't think it's going to happen. I really, truly don't. I don't think it's going to happen.
With that, I mean, obviously they're in a coaching search now. I would think he's running it, even if his seat is red hot. Where do you think they're looking? And obviously, some names have popped up, but where do you think they're headed? And what are some names that you think they should go for?
I'm really intrigued at the whole Kalen DeBoer thing, and I know what people are thinking. Well, wait a second. Alabama's playing in a playoff, and they're focused on that. Yeah, but I mean, I think you guys have read the tea leaves. It's always difficult to be the guy who replaces the guy. It just is, and that's an unenviable position, no doubt about that. If they lose to Oklahoma, does that mean that he becomes available? And first and foremost, is Kalen DeBoer at or near the top of their list? And I think the answer to the latter is yes. And again, this is just speculation, and you might know this person or you might know that person, but that's a name that keeps coming up. I even heard somebody say yesterday that they think that there's an offer in place, and a really big offer at that, depending on what transpires after that game against Oklahoma. But, again, I don't know. I think that would be a good fit. This is a guy with a good reputation. I'm not so sure he's ever going to make it work in Alabama. I'm serious. That's a different place, man. It just is. So that's the way that it goes. But, you can say what you want about what this does to Michigan's brand. You can say that it's bruised. You can say that it'll never be the same. It's still Michigan. That's the reality of it, guys. I don't care if you're the biggest Michigan fan or you're the biggest Spartan or biggest Buckeye. That brand means something. And I don't think there's a coach in the country that wouldn't be interested in going to a place like that with the resources as well at their disposal. So, short of saying they've got the pick of the litter, because I'm not so sure. I heard somebody say Lane Kiffin, and it's like, oh, goodness gracious. You roll your eyes after everything that just happened. But they're going to have their pick of almost the litter. I'm convinced of it.
I'm not sure people remember this or realize it, but Kalen DeBoer knows the Ann Arbor area. Like, he was the offensive coordinator, quarterback coach at EMU for 2 years, right? So, I mean, he knows a little bit about this. And I've said for a while, like, I think it has to be a guy that has an offensive track record and somebody who's been good with quarterbacks before. But I would hope for their sake they get somebody in place as soon as possible, because now they're going through those bowl practices, right? And the worst thing that I think could happen is after this bowl game, they bring somebody on and the scheme is completely different than what he's been doing, right? And right now, like, people talk about the importance of bowl practices, and they're a big deal in his development. Again, he's 18, 19 years old, right? For Bryce Underwood, we're talking about. So to me, it has to stop right, hard stop. Like, it's got to be somebody with an offensive background or has ties to somebody that can come in and work really well with quarterbacks. Especially with the way the season ended for Bryce Underwood. Like, I still think he's an extremely physically talented dude, right? But obviously there needs to be some more growth for him going into the next season or into the spring.
I think that was the biggest problem that I had this year in doing the jobs that I do and talking to some of the Michigan fans that I do is I think they were victims of their own expectations. He was a true freshman, okay? Trevor Lawrence's don't grow on trees, okay? It just doesn't work that way. And I felt with their schedule, I'll be honest with you guys, if I were Michigan, I would have taken Oklahoma off the schedule and fired Northern Illinois on there. And, you do something like that, and maybe, just maybe, they're a playoff team right now. I mean, that's how crazy the dynamic is. But with that being said, Coach, I agree with you 100%. I got a chance to see this kid more than a few times playing in the great high school ranks in this state. Yeah. And I'm a firm believer in his talent. Now you have to put him in those positions of comfortability.
Mm-hmm.
How much do you think that maybe this season the coaching maybe had failed him a little bit? And when you look at everything that was going on with Sherrone Moore, maybe that he wasn't developed in the proper way. And Brian and I talked a lot about this after the Ohio State game. And I talked about this all year. I thought he should have been more involved in the run game a lot more. And I remember listening to David Pollock's podcast going into the game, and he said that most times any designed runs for him, the most in the game were 3. And I'm like, is a quarterback with that athletic ability and maybe his passing game isn't as developed as you would like it to be, and you would expect that as a true freshman, well, run him. Utilize his athletic ability and design runs for him. And it just didn't seem like they did that enough throughout the year. And I'm curious about your opinion on just his overall development through the year. And did you notice, as much as Brian and I did, like in that Ohio State game, like he just seemed really, really uncomfortable.
You know what? To me, guys, and I'm serious when I say this. I'm not just saying that this because Coach Barnes is here. I had a real eye opener when I was working down in Toledo. I got a chance to sit in on a film session with Coach Pinkel. Okay, and I'm a big fan of Gary Pinkel.
Yeah.
And the thing that blew my mind, is you think you know football. We don't know a darn thing.
Yeah.
Those guys are thinking on different levels, man. They're just in a different world than us. And I am so serious when I say that. But the one thing that I saw during the year, and I think it goes hand in hand with what you were saying, Michigan just looked off all year to me. It didn't look like Michigan. And I'm not trying to be that guy and say I'm the smartest guy in the world room and I know more than they do. I'm admitting how short I am in that regard. But I think, you know what Michigan wants to do. You know how they want to do it. They looked off all year. And I think it was part of a bigger problem. Now, I know it's easy to throw shade at the offensive coordinator. I know it's easy to throw shade at Wink, but I think it starts at the top. And I think the 2 years of Sherrone Moore, they just didn't look like Michigan. And I, in my humble opinion, and I'm not a Michigan fan, but I don't think it evoked a lot of confidence either. And if I can see that at home, and you know, some of these kids can play like that, I think there's more validity to that kind of talk than anybody wants to lend credence to, Dan.
And well, to that point, Dan and I talked about this. Like, okay, granted, when Sherrone Moore took over, like, yeah, the cupboard wasn't exactly bare. I mean, obviously they lost some guys, right? But the cupboard is never bare at Michigan, right? And then you would go into this new 12-team playoff, and Michigan didn't make it one time those 2 years, right? I mean, which is like, even with that step back, that's still kind of surprising if you're Michigan and you're still right. You're at that elite level, and to your point, they weren't.
Yeah. You saw it all year. I mean, it was to me, it was very obvious and everything. And but at the end of the day, you know, I know, and this always happens, you know, when a coach leaves anyway. Now you start to hear this stuff. Well, we weren't on the same page. Well, these guys didn't like them. Well, these guys were frustrated. You know, I don't know the truth. I know last week I heard what I heard. There were some players' meetings and there was some, you know, discontent, so to speak. But I think a lot of times the eye test kind of shows things. And this didn't look like a great football team in any way, shape, or form this season. They really didn't.